Now, that's something to keep in mind tonight when Trump gives a speech. Again, as I said, we're recording this. It's around noon Eastern time. We're recording this early on Tuesday. By the time you get this podcast or listen to it, Trump will have given his speech, which is going to be chock-a-block with bullshit, but it's going to be interesting to watch. George Zornick, writing at The Nation, makes a pretty good point. The networks that are airing Trump's fucked up little speech tonight are endangering immigrants and the country. Now, what does he mean by that? Zornick adds that fact-checking this son of a bitch's hate is not a sufficient fix. What Trump spews, why the networks are carrying this, I don't know. I mean, maybe public radio should carry it. But anyway, Zornick writes, President Trump will address the nation from the Oval Office Tuesday evening after every American broadcast news organization granted him the rare presidential privilege of uninterrupted airtime on their networks. This privilege was denied to President Obama in 2014 when he wanted to address the nation about comprehensive immigration reform. And the network's decision to give Trump the green light came only hours after he declared via tweet that, quote, "The fake news media in our country is the real opposition party. It is truly the enemy of the people," end quote. If this filthy son of a bitch Trump continues to say that, why are the news organizations providing this piece of shit with a forum where he can reach literally hundreds of millions of people? Is it a death wish on the part of the networks? Why give this creep fuck the time to get out there and propagandize like this? Anyway, Zornick goes on, there's been a fair amount of hand-wringing from the mainstream press about granting Trump an unfiltered platform to tell lies, as he always does. CNN's chief media correspondent Brian Stetler tweeted that the address will, quote, hopefully be surrounded by fact-checking, end quote. Anderson Cooper defended his network's decision by saying, quote, it's not our job to argue for or against walls. What is our job is to point out when officials are making their case disingenuously or dishonestly, when they're making stuff up, end quote. Anderson Cooper. But there's a greater danger here. There really is. And Zornick points it out. He writes, Trump's address is far more serious than a case of misleading people about basic policy facts, like the net migration flows at the border. Trump always lies about that. Or the efficacy of physical border barriers. Trump always lies about that. Tonight, Zornick writes, Trump will bend the facts, that means lie, in service of a years-long racist and demagogic campaign against Latin American immigrants. He will assuredly dehumanize them as terrorists, criminals, carriers of disease, as he has from the very first day of his campaign in 2015. This kind of rhetoric has led to violence from both vigilantes and the state. And meekly fact-checking his numbers is an insufficient remedy for airing Trump's 15-minute hate. News executives need only look a few months into the past to see why this is dangerous. Zornick writes, as the midterms approached, Trump's lies and distortions about immigration spiked. In late October, Trump was advancing over 30 lies per day about immigration, according to data compiled by the Washington Post's fact-checking team. Many of these lies advanced the ludicrous idea that there was a caravan of dangerous people heading towards the U.S.-Mexico border. Whatever happened to that? Isn't it amazing how that just fucking dissolved into thin air once the election was over? But according to Trump's tweets at the time, this onslaught, as he referred to it, of migrants included in his tweets, all caps, many criminals. This was bullshit. These were lies. But many people believed it, and some people acted on those lies. Robert Bowers, who shot 11 people to death in a Pittsburgh synagogue on October 27th, posted obsessively online about the caravan in the week leading up to the shooting. His specific belief that the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society was aiding the caravan in order to foment violence in the United States, this is how fucked up this is, appears to have directly precipitated his decision to shoot up the Tree of Life synagogue and murder 11 people who were going about their religious/cultural business of worshiping in their place of worship. But Robert Bowers decided to kill him based on what Trump was saying. Online, a few hours before the killings, he wrote, quote, "Screw your optics, I'm going in." And if you remember, Trump repeatedly suggested that the migrants were being funded or assisted some way by the Jew George Soros. Then there was the case of the 3 men in Kansas who were arrested in the weeks leading up to the 2016 election for a plot to kill Somali immigrants in their homes in order to, quote, in the words of these sick white fuckers, quote, wake people up about the immigrant threat. At sentencing this year, lawyers for one of the men asked for leniency because his client had been so whipped up by the national discourse on immigration. The national discourse on immigration. Who has been making this into a subject of fear and loathing and danger and weirdness? This fucker in the White House, Trump. This useless, worse than useless, piece of shit, Donald Trump. In their sentencing memo, the lawyers for one of these killers, or one of these plotters to kill people, one of the lawyers wrote, quote, the court cannot ignore the circumstances of one of the most rhetorically mold-breaking, violent, awful, hateful, and contentious presidential elections in modern history, driven in large measure by the rhetorical China shop bull who is now our president, end quote. Those were the defense lawyers, not the prosecutors, the defense lawyers. That was their defense, that the 3 men arrested, tried, and convicted for a plot to kill Somali immigrants in their homes had been stirred up by this crazy fucker that now squats in the White House, Donald Trump. And the defense lawyers tried to make that point. Then there's an immigration reform group called America's Voice. They also track hate incidents by Trump supporters and staff members throughout the last presidential campaign, ranging from shouted racial or ethnic slurs all the way up to actual violence. And then George Zornick, writing in The Nation, he says, whether or not Trump directly incited many of these violent acts could always be debated. Maybe these were people who in some cases would have lashed out anyway. But there is no question that Trump is creating an atmosphere of racial hatred and xenophobia, and, as it always has throughout history, violence follows. I don't think there's any debate to be had about Trump's causing the chaos and the ugliness and the mean-spiritedness and the viciousness of his followers, and not just his redneck, rabid, white, fascistic followers, but also those members of the Christian church who have decided to fuck their Jesus right up the ass and develop a theory of Christianity that is violent, hateful, mean-spirited, ugly, but they don't care. Because their leadership now, the Christian evangelical leadership, is telling these crazed fuckers that all of this stuff Jesus said about loving your neighbor and being gentle, that doesn't apply now. That applies in heaven. These dirty sons of bitches. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. You have your choice. You can listen to the ranting with the audio podcast or listen and watch me lose control with a video podcast subscription. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.